Okay, I think we're starting. Boker Tov, everybody, and good morning. My name is Michael Kessler, for those that don't know me, and I am Jewish National Fund's Tri-State President and a proud member of the National Board. I am also a proud member of the Negev Society and Century Council's major donor societies. Although we're not together in person this year, I would like to welcome you to our annual Jewish National Fund Breakfast for Israel. Thank you to our board presidents for chairing this event, Larry Ingber, Joan and Robert Oppenheimer, Debbie Riegel, Julie Schnipper, and Diane Sklar. You all work so hard to build JNF's vision to build a stronger Israel, and we appreciate all your efforts. For those of you who have joined us before, welcome back to our JNF family reunion, and thank you for taking time out this morning to be part of JNF's success. To our new faces, I hope to share you a glimpse of the amazing work JNF does in Israel every single day to secure a prosperous future for the land and people of Israel. Before we begin the program, I would like to introduce you to Julie, president of our JNF Future, to share her JNF story. Julie, take it away.
Thanks, Michael, for that warm welcome, and good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Schipper, and I am the president of the JNF Future New York Board and a proud member of JNF's Women for Israel High Society. I am so glad to be here with you this morning and hope you're all staying safe and healthy during this time. Even though this year is a bit different than our normal yearly breakfast, I hope you're all still enjoying your own delicious breakfast, maybe some bagels and lox, in the comfort of your own home. I first became involved with JNF when I moved back to New York City after college. I was looking for a new Jewish community that was not only young Jews getting to hang out and enjoying each other's company, but also an organization that was truly making a difference. JNF is exactly what I was looking for. Fun young Jews that really do get to have a great time together, and I promise you we do, but who are also using their time and money wisely. In 2016, I was nominated to attend the JNF Future Jewish Leadership Institute mission in Israel. This mission was a 10-day trip to Israel where we were able to experience a number of JNF projects hands-on. Getting to see these projects in person was truly life-changing, and one that really made an impact on me was the Sderot Indoor Playground. If you've ever been to this area of Israel, families in this area have about 5 seconds to get to a bomb shelter when there's any sort of threat in the area. This playground has given children the opportunity to play and learn in a safe environment. And being able to see these children getting to play without fear was an unforgettable experience, and one I hope that you will get to experience on your own. In such unpredictable times, I am proud to say that Jewish National Fund was there yesterday, we will be there today, and we will be there tomorrow. Since 1901, JNF's focus has been to ensure a strong, secure, and prosperous Israel, and JNF continues to do so much. JNF is the single largest provider of Israel engagement programs in the US. We are making the north and south of Israel not only a safe place to live, but a place where people really want to live. On college campuses, Jewish National Fund trains and supports pro-Israel college students to promote Israel as a country striving to make the world a better place. And finally, JNF does incredible work in special needs and disability communities, whether it be through making nature accessible to all, through our world-class rehabilitation hospital, or integrating the special needs community into the Israeli Defense Force. JNF makes sure no one is left behind. I think projects like the Sderot Playground that I talked about a bit earlier are very relatable at a time. While we may not be worried about being attacked, we are all living through a pandemic and may be worried about getting sick or even nervous or anxious about what comes after this. I know as a young adult living in New York City with a dad and brother who are both medical professionals on the front line, I'm extremely worried, but imagine being one of those families living in Sderot. You already are living in fear about potentially being attacked and now have an additional fear about getting sick. We are now living in a world of uncertainty, fear, and of course Zoom calls, but JNF is here to help with Israel's immediate needs. Today we have an opportunity to do something so special for Israel. Today we can supply laptops for children with disabilities from low socioeconomic backgrounds, helping them to continue their treatment and studies remotely. Today, we can help small businesses who are suffering from lack of tourism. Today, we can sponsor food and necessities for senior citizens. And today, we can help job seekers in the Negev and the Galilee find employment. So today, we are going to help continue to build a nation and make lives better. Right here, right now, we are going to make a contribution to the Jewish National Fund. You should all receive a text and email right now to make your gift. Please join me. You will also be able to see links right here on the screen. I have made my gift already this year, and I'm making an additional gift today so that we have 100% participation. Please join me in making your gift. During this tough time, let's all help those in Israel that are truly in need. I'm excited to announce a fun opportunity. We are raffling a private virtual cooking class with Chef Lior Lev Sarkaz, and anyone who makes a donation today of $1,800 or more will be entered into this raffle. And I can promise you it will be a great evening. I mean, who doesn't really want a delicious meal? May is also Women's Month, and all gifts made by women in the room will be matched dollar for dollar today. So my fellow women, let's do it today. Thank you so much and have a great morning.
Good morning. My name is Scott Shea. I'm chairman and I'm co-founder of Signature Bank of New York. We are the proud sponsor of this year's JNF Breakfast for Israel, and we've sponsored the last 3 breakfasts, if I'm not mistaken, and we're longtime supporters of JNF, and I personally am a longtime supporter of JNF. We at Signature Bank lately have been working deeply with many of you who may be on the phone with respect to your businesses as we collectively navigate this bewildering time for modern humanity. And I hope we'll get some insights on just this bewildering time, because it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speakers for this morning's conversation. The first speaker will be JNF's Chief Israel Officer, Eric Michelson, who is on the ground floor in Israel and will speak to us, he manages all the Israeli operations for JNF and for JNF's 30 plus partner organizations. Last year, I had the privilege of introducing Barry Weiss. And this year, I have the privilege of introducing the second reason, and there are only 2 reasons that I've continued my New York Times subscription. So I'm happy to welcome Bret Stephens, who is our keynote. And like many of you, I definitely need my fix along with a lot going on of Bret Stephens' insight. He is an op-ed columnist for the New York Times. He's formerly deputy editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal. He's a former editor of the Jerusalem Post, former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post. And most importantly, he always has really breathtaking insights and looks at the world without preconceived narratives. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from both of our speakers today. So first of all, take it away, Eric.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you all. Good morning and good afternoon from here, the Jerusalem, Israel headquarters of Jewish National Fund USA in Israel. I couldn't think of a better group of people that I would have this conversation with right now during these times. As the famous Hebrew adage goes, "Hine ma tov u'ma na'im, shevet achim gam yachad," how good and pleasant it is for brethren to come together, and what an important time this is to come together. And I would like to share with you what is happening right now in Israel in general, and then more in depth what Jewish National Fund is doing about it, because we are all doing collectively together a heck of a lot. To date, COVID-19 has taken a toll in Israel as it has done internationally. And unfortunately, we have lost 239 citizens in Israel who have perished. Every life, the Hebrew Talmud says, Kol Adam hu olam umlo, every person is a world in of its own. And we mourn each of these lives that we have lost. At the same time, we are incredibly fortunate that in such a small land, and I think that almost everyone on this call is very familiar with Israel, a very condensed country, which is part of the mission statement of Jewish National Fund of spreading out to our frontiers. The Negev and Galil is because of this, but people are in the big cities between Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, Haifa corridor, and families together in apartment homes, large families, and this could have been a lot worse than it was. We are fortunate for that. At the same time, obviously health is not the only aspect of COVID-19, and there's economics. And right now, just to give, to illustrate the impact on the economy that we have yet to know where it will end, and we only know where it begins, I'll talk, for instance, about the impact on the tourism industry in Israel, which is vast and something that, of course, at JNF, as the largest service provider for Israel immersive experiences, and many of our affiliates are involved in, we know a lot about tourism. To date, over 4 billion shekel, which is roughly, the ratio is 3.5 to the dollar, but over 4 billion shekel net loss to the Israel tourism industry. We're talking about 250,000 people who are directly in the tourism industry, hoteliers and tourist providers and tour guides and so on, and indirectly over 1 million people impacted by this, okay? So we're talking about a population of Israel, which is roughly 9 million people. Of them, 1 million people have been impacted. And that's just strictly talking about tourism. I haven't gotten yet to businesses, small businesses, and so on. You could imagine every walk of life that was impacted, same as the United States, so it has been here. So what is Jewish National Fund doing about the situation? And we're doing a lot, and time is short, and we want to all hear from Bret as well. So I just want to give in very broad strokes a sense of the gamut of what JNF is doing right now, and what we have been doing for the past couple of months, and we will need to continue doing until this is behind us. So we've been providing food deliveries to elderly, severely ill, olim, other people in quarantine and so on. We're running call centers and distribution centers to run this. This is to thousands of people. Wellness phone calls to all populations in need, grocery shopping, pharmaceuticals, running daycare centers for children of medical professionals and other, first responders. In order for people to do their jobs during these times, someone has to take care of their homes, so we're doing that as well. Art, entertainment, and treat kits to the families that have been stuck at home, financial support to those in need, providing packages with local produce. Israel shut its borders like everyone else, right? We have a lot of local produce. Again, our farmers, the people primarily in the Negev and Galilee, who are the farmers of Israel, and they are the natural affiliates of JNF, and they were based also on the foreign workers coming in. So we ran a volunteer system, thousands of volunteers working the fields through JNF to provide the locals produce. So first of all, we saved the farmers, but more importantly, Israel could continue feeding itself. Assistance to employers and employees, all the small businesses and people who are now seeking jobs. There is currently 27% unemployment in Israel due to the situation. We were at 4% before this. So providing assistance, HR services, marketing, job seekers working with their resumes, and we're putting together, as we speak, a small business bureau association. Community building online, resilience, camaraderie, events, buddy systems, general support, olim and others in need, online education systems and programs. Our Alexander Mas High School in Israel, we have moved, first of all, we evacuated everyone just in time. We had our little Entebbe with Elal to get everyone back home just in time. And we've moved everything to the digital and cyber world, so we could continue the education as we have done with Green Horizons and the other education systems we're working with. Special needs, special in uniform, Lotem, Red Mountain Writing Center, Ala Negev, the various partners for population and special needs, doing basically everything that they need right now, the complete service package. So we're talking about support systems and groups for the families. We're running visits to their homes, running online programs, providing them with the tablets and laptops so they can partake in these programs. We're also providing short virtual tours of sites, nature, history, so people who are stuck at home can continue experiencing Israel. Online sales platforms for all these businesses who need to continue functioning. There's what we call the mitzvah program that people now online can purchase there, and then we have art shops so they could exhibit their work and purchase online through our delivery system, and the list goes on and on and on. Aggregately, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who have been impacted and assisted through our various affiliates, those 30 plus affiliates that Scott mentioned earlier. You all know their names: Shomer Chadash, Makom, Nefesh B'Nefesh, Ale Negev. The list is too long to go through. And we were able to do this thanks to you, thanks to the leadership, the partners, the many donors of Jewish National Fund who are stepping up. They're giving more gifts, they're paying their pledges early, and they are doing whatever it takes so we could get that job done. And the news is that we have to keep on doing this. Our affiliates, when we call and we ask, what are you getting from others? What are you getting from the government of Israel? They're saying, we're not getting anything. And this is really where they need Jewish National Fund USA, because without us, many, if not all, of our affiliates will simply shut down. And not only will we be dropping the ball, like I said, on the national impact of hundreds of thousands of people, and I don't want to know, I can't imagine where Israel would be and what we would look like right now without the services that JNF is providing throughout the country. But more importantly, perhaps, or equally importantly, is that many of these affiliates will shut down. And the cost and ability to set them back up when all this is behind us would simply be impossible. And that's why we have to keep running. I wish I could share, and we had the time to show you how we are touching them and the ongoing messages that we're getting from mayors and regional councils and the various organizations and people who are out there just thanking. They can't thank JNF enough, and they appreciate that, especially during these times, the hardships for us, the hardships on the US end, that our leadership is still there standing with Israel and by Israel. And lastly, you saw, I'm not going to outline all the needs, but you saw some of them from the wonderful presentation of Julie. And please feel free to contact us, myself and my team in Israel, as well as the professionals in the US. And we have the lists of the needs that are ongoing, and we're here to field any questions. And again, I can't thank you enough for everything that you are doing. Thank you so much, and I will pass it on now to our next speaker. Bret, please take it.
Well, thank you very much, Eric and Scott and all of you at JNF as an organization and leaders within the organization. I'm always delighted to speak to JNF for not simply because of all that it has done for Israel, but also all that it has done for my family, dedicating 2 forests, one in memory of my great-grandmother about 20 years ago, and another in memory of my late father about 5 years ago. Those were some of the most moving experiences of my life. And I know that at every JNF breakfast, one of the speakers will say, we're not just about forests, and I know that's true. But in my case, it is about forests, and that means a lot to me. So I am personally grateful to JNF, and I'm glad to participate in this call, not so much as a speaker for the organization, but as a donor to the organization and as an admirer of all that you do. I want to provide a kind of a broad overview of where I think we are. I am, after all, a columnist, and I write about politics and foreign policy. And the events of the last 3 months bring all of my interests together. I wish they could bring them together in a somewhat more positive way. But I wanted to give you perhaps some thoughts about how to think about where we stand on a number of levels and how those levels touch one another. The first question, of course, concerns epidemiology. As my mother never ceases to remind me, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an epidemiologist, I am simply an interested amateur. But these are some comments which I don't think are going to be particularly controversial even to the doctors and epidemiologists who might be listening in on this call. There are really 3 great questions that now confront us globally as we at least reach the peak of the epidemics or past the peak of the epidemics for now in this current wave. The first question is one about recurrence. Are we just at the top or past the top of the first wave, or is this going to come back seasonally, regularly, irregularly. We really don't know. The second question obviously has to do with mutation. Just yesterday, I read a distressing article in the Los Angeles Times suggesting that scientists at Los Alamos had identified new mutations of COVID, which raises serious questions about whether we'll fully be able to get a handle on this disease. And of course, the third question, which has interested me a great deal and which I've written about in some of my columns for the New York Times, has to do with the possibilities of therapy and cure. And I think that in each of these cases, it's probably wise, of course, to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. There's been a lot of talk about the possibility that we might develop vaccines in the very near future. There are reports that Pfizer is already testing vaccines on people. This has been a very active area in Israel. We had last week the report from that remdesivir seems to have positive therapeutic benefits, shortens recovery times. That's obviously very good news. But I think it behooves us to be relatively, if not pessimistic, at least realistic about the course of this disease, and to get over the belief that we might be able to move past COVID, whether in this mutation or another, in the relatively near future. And so this is something that we're going to just have to deal with, both the medical profession as well as deal with the consequences of this socially. This brings me to the second aspect, the second wave that concerns me even more, which is the economic wave. Eric, you mentioned what has happened to the Israeli economy. I think it's worth thinking a little bit more about what's happening in the American economy. In February, we are now in the first week of April. In February, the unemployment rate of the United States stood at 3.5%. It is now 16.1%. We have, in the space of 2.5 months, erased all of the job gains that were made over the course of the last decade and the recovery from the Great Recession. And there is no end, because the waves of banks are going to continue to roll in nearly every direction in a kind of a tsunami-like effect. Second point to make about the economic situation is that there are limits to what the federal government can do to prop up an economy. We have, or had, before a 30% contraction, we had a roughly $21 trillion economy. We have a federal government that operates on about a $4.5 trillion budget. And so the idea that we can simply essentially nationalize every aspect of the economy through unemployment benefits, by government subsidies and subventions for different industries, by keeping industries open, there's a limit to how long that can work. And my sense is that it's not going to work for a very long time, or not going to work for much longer, I should say. The third point that I should mention in terms of economic consequences is the consequences that we are going to see not simply unfolding in the United States, but unfolding globally. I grew up in Mexico City. There was a saying in Mexico that when the United States catches a cold, Mexico gets pneumonia. Well, what happens when the United States catches COVID-19? The consequences are serious, not just for immediate neighbors like Mexico and Canada. They are serious throughout the world. So what we are looking at isn't simply a steep recession or even a depression in the United States. We are looking at the first global depression that the world has seen since the late 1920s and early 1930s. So the year that we hear so often mentioned when we talk about COVID is 1918, because it brings to mind the effects of Spanish flu. But we are in 1918 plus 1929. That is to say, both the pandemic as well as the last great Wall Street crash. Curiously, Wall Street has been doing just fine in the last month, which may be an interesting countervailing indicator, or may be a sign that what happens on Wall Street simply doesn't reflect what happens in the real economy. And the third point, since I mentioned economic effects on the global economy, is that we need to think about political effects. It is simply a mistake to imagine that what happens on an economic level isn't going to have not just social, but also political consequences. And one of the interesting aspects of this pandemic is that it reminds us that disease breeds, authoritarianism breeds disease. If China had been less of a closed society, if they had been more open and transparent about the outbreak of COVID at an earlier date, if they had not tried to punish whistleblowers, but had instead acted in a more forthright manner, it might have been the case, we can't say for sure, but it might have been the case that COVID would have had the same fate as SARS or MERS or other similar viruses that had only regional and relatively limited impacts. But if authoritarianism breeds disease, the opposite also seems to be true, which is that disease can breed authoritarianism. It is very worrying, for example, to see how the COVID crisis has been used in governments in Central Europe to shore up and centralize control, to provide emergency and extraordinary powers for the people in charge. We should be concerned, those of us who care about civil liberties, about the potential abuses of new surveillance powers that will be enacted initially in the interests of public health, and might be enacted quite sincerely in the interests of public health, but which at a later date can be misused for Chinese-style surveillance and control of the population. And we should be worried about how these economic consequences, severe depression, mass unemployment, failures of businesses, centralization of power, of economic power in governments, can lead to a new era of authoritarianism. So in the interests of making sure that all talks at Jewish organizations be as depressing as possible, let's say that we're dealing not only with 1918 and 1929, but my fear is that we might also be dealing with 1933 as another date to be mindful of. Now, not all of the strategic consequences of COVID are going to be bad. I was reading in the Times of Israel the other day that Iran most recently was able to sell just 150,000 barrels a day. Now you guys can do the math. If you're selling oil at, say, $30 a barrel, 150,000 barrels means an income for Iran of $4.5 million. That is not a lot of national income, daily national income, for a country of more than 80 million people. And this weakening that we have seen in Iran is having strategic consequences, seemingly positive strategic consequences for the region. The most latest news is that Iran may be pulling up stakes in its efforts to control Syria because they can't afford it, because Bashar Assad has realized that Iran's presence is bad for his regime, and this means a major strategic victory for Israel in reverse tide in the Levant. It's a different story a bit with Hezbollah. The state of Lebanon is in outright collapse, And Hezbollah is now the effective government, or may become the effective government there. We'll have to see. And Lebanon is always a story that concerns me a great deal. But at least for now, both Iran and its proxies are weaker. Question we might also ask while we're at it, though, is what does this mean, the collapse of oil prices, for relatively friendly regimes like Saudi Arabia? Can't believe I'm saying that Saudi Arabia is a relatively friendly regime, but the world is full of surprises. Or some of the Gulf states like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and of course Oman on the Arabian Sea. So that has consequences, some of them positive, but some of them also potentially very worrying. Larger question here, if we're looking at a global picture, is what this sharp economic contraction means in terms of the global balance of power. One thing that I've observed for a long time is that economic crises tend to make democracies risk averse, but they tend to make dictatorships risk prone. That is to say, countries, not just Iranians, but also perhaps in China, perhaps in Russia, see economic crises as threats to their regime and seek to re-legitimize themselves or hold on to power with foreign adventures, especially against democratic governments that are trying to minimize defense spending, trying to lessen their commitments or make their commitments abroad much cheaper for themselves. So again, I said 1918, 1929, 1933, an era of in which democracies were weak and fearful, and in which dictatorships felt emboldened and were disposed to towards taking risks. Now, this is, as I said, my effort is to paint as depressing a picture for all of you as possible. But in the words of Woody Allen, it's always darkest before it goes absolutely black. That was intended. That was intended purely as a joke. There are reasons to certainly be hopeful. There are reasons to look the most pessimistic scenarios in the eye and believe that, in fact, we can do better. And for me, one of those reasons begins when I look at Israel. You know, I've been paying very close attention to the case fatality ratios around the world. You know, there is a certain amount of panic when it comes to COVID. I think that's partly the nature of the news business. Bad news sells. Terror inspires readership. But there are reasons for optimism at the epidemiological level, and one of those reasons starts with Israel. Israel, as Eric said, has suffered just 238 fatalities. It's important to put that into perspective. 238 fatalities in Israel means a fatality rate of about 2.7 deaths per 100,000 people. That is equivalent, or in fact, I think slightly better than the fatality rate in Iceland. It's hard to imagine a country that is more isolated and more easily self-isolated than Iceland. And yet Israel, a vast, or at least a diverse, boisterous, far more populous country than Iceland, has been able to meet that record. With the possible exceptions of Singapore and a handful of other places, no other country with reliable data, and I stress the point about reliable data, no other country with reliable data has done as well as Israel has. And Israel provides us with something of a potential model. Another point of comparison, by the way, Germany is often touted as a country that has done very well in its fight against the epidemic. In Germany, the fatality rate is 8.4. So just compare Israel 2.7 to Germany's 8.4. Never mind the state of New York, 129. Second cause for optimism, it seems to me, is that there are examples of countries that have kept their economies running by using common sense precautions, by not shutting down completely, and by minimizing the economic impact. One of those countries is Sweden. Again, one of the great surprises in my life coming from the conservative side of the political divide is thinking that I would ever tout the Swedish model when it came to anything. It makes me sound a little bit like Bernie Sanders. But the Swedish model is a good one, not because they've been laissez-faire, but because they have shifted to a model which focuses on the protection and the concentration of resources on vulnerable populations rather than blanket nationwide restrictions. And if you read some newspapers, they will tell you that Sweden has not done as well as its neighbors Norway, Finland, and Denmark, which is true. But then again, Sweden has done vastly better than countries like France and the UK, and about as well as Ireland, countries all of which had lockdowns. So Sweden points us in a way that I think is the right way for America to start thinking about where it wants to go. Can we concentrate our resources on the vulnerable? Can we protect the populations we know are most at risk, particularly the elderly and those who are immunocompromised, while accepting a much greater degree of openness, even if that entails risk for the rest of the population? And it seems to me that that is a model that we should begin to follow soon, and we might be able to do so relatively effectively. The third thing that gives me hope is the possibility that even if we don't develop a cure, or that is to say a vaccine, or very effective therapies, we are on our way, much slower than most of us would like, but we are on our way to the possibility of an effective and simple testing regime in which a spit test, a saliva test can give you very rapid results, which allows people to move about, more people to move about to work, get on airplanes, and do so with a great deal more confidence than they can do so today. And so return not to normalcy as we knew it before. We're not going to return to that normalcy, but to a new normalcy, somewhat like the difference between the United States before 9/11 and the United States after 9/11. More layers of security, more precautions taken, but not crippling to society at large. I think there are just two other points that I'd like to mention, which I think are very important. I think the role of philanthropy, I should say conspicuous philanthropy, has never been more important, precisely because the economic consequences are so grave. So many people are going to find themselves in so many former haves are going to find themselves in the have-not category. That this is a moment that is going to test capitalism and test the moral legitimacy and reputation of capitalism. Are the people who still have financial means, are the people who have been lucky by virtue of the industries in which they work throughout this pandemic, are they going to step up? I think it's critical that they do so, not only in the interest of those that they can stand to help, but it's critical that they do so in their own long-term interests. I think in eras of mass unemployment, it is important that people who have done well for themselves show that their wealth stands for something greater than their own comfort or their own livelihoods, that their wealth is going to work towards the benefit of those who have been much less fortunate. I'm going to be writing about that and the obligations of the wealthy in my column in the New York Times. Again, not simply for the sake of benevolence, but for the sake of self-interest. And the final point I want to make is this. In the 1930s, the world learned way too many of the wrong lessons. In an era of global depression, instead of moving towards greater openness, we moved towards isolationism. We moved towards restrictions on immigration. We moved towards greater hesitancy in confronting dictatorship, confronting authoritarianism, and confronting dangerous and totalitarian ideologies. And the result of that was a tragedy on a scale that the world has never seen before. We are in a position not to repeat those mistakes once again. It happens that this is the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Mauthausen concentration camp. And in Mexico City today, one of my family's oldest friends, and by oldest I mean that later this year he will turn 99, he, Luis Stillman, and his wife Buba are writing out the COVID pandemic, writing out the threat right now. And it was 75 years ago this week that Luis was liberated from Mauthausen. It was 75 years ago, a little earlier this year, that his wife Buba was liberated from Auschwitz. Those are important reminders of the trials that we have suffered and also survived in the past. And given also this other anniversary, the 72nd anniversary of the founding of Israel, Yom Ha'atzmaut, I think it's important to bear in mind that hope matters, and that we have been through far worse, and that we have seen and will see much better days. I mean that very sincerely. I'm a pessimist by nature. I worry about what we're going through today, but I think there are also causes for optimism. We're capable of learning the lessons of the past. We're capable of overcoming worse. We're capable of using our ingenuity and our charity for great purposes. So let's do all of that. And with that, thank you very much. And I hope I haven't taken too much of your time. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Debbie Riegel. I am the president of the New York board. I'm also a member of JNF's national board, a member of JNF's Century Council, and Circle of Sapphire donor societies. I want to first thank Signature Bank and Scott Shea for generously sponsoring our breakfast again. We very much appreciate it, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you for your partnership. I want to thank Eric Michelson for joining us from Israel. I frequently say, in good times, I say that, they do the hard work of actually building the land. We do the easy work of writing the checks that help them do that. Now more than ever, they are doing the very hard work. So thank you, Eric. And most importantly, thank you, Bret, for once again, a challenging and thought-provoking morning. I have never walked away from one of your presentations without something to think about. And once again, that is the case. So thank you for joining us this morning. And thank you to all of you who have joined us to hear Bret. We very much appreciate your continued connection with JNF. I think now more than ever, community is critically important. We are all isolated. We are all feeling that isolation. And while we're all hoping it's over soon, joining together and having this sense of community and hearing about the transformative work that JNF is continuing to do in Israel is, to me, more important than ever. Keeping that touchstone while we can't physically be connected with Israel is critical to what we do and critical to the people that we so lovingly support in Israel. There's one story that I heard as we've all been getting stories from Israel during this pandemic that sort of struck a chord with me. For those of you who know about our Special in Uniform program, this is a program for special needs young adults who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate in IDF service, which is so much a part of the Israeli culture. And I got an email probably about 2 weeks ago that our Special in Uniform kids were preparing test kits so that the Israeli population could be tested and so that the IDF could be tested. And, it brought home to me that everything we do is so integrated with the needs of the Israeli society. And as much as we're giving and supporting our programs and supporting the kids who are in special and uniform, they are taking what we're giving them and they're supporting the Israeli population themselves. So it was a reminder to me then, and it is a reminder to me now that more than ever, our gifts are truly making a difference. So I would like to remind all of you that the gifts that are made today are all going to emergency needs in Israel. I would particularly like to remind the women on the call that all of your gifts will be matched because this is Women's Month. And I will accept Bret's challenge. And I am personally going to make an additional gift of $1,800 today to support everything that we are trying to do. And I hope that many of you will be able to join me. And then I want to end with one last opportunity for all of you. For those of us who frequently travel to Israel, the inability to be there has been a little bit disconcerting, and the thought of not being able to be there for some extended period of time is concerning. And as Eric mentioned, the impact on tourism in Israel has been really dramatic. So we who travel to Israel frequently all have our favorite guides, and they have in some cases become friends and family, and those guides are really suffering. So we have put together virtual missions to Israel. And I would like to invite any of you who have the time and would like to get that Israel connection to join us. You will be getting an email about the virtual missions. These are not fundraisers for JNF. These are missions that we are putting together both to connect you to the work we are doing in Israel, and also to support our guides who are really struggling right now with a complete shutdown of their industry. So if you are available and you would like to join us, please either respond to Michael Feynman or any, I'm not sure who the email is going to come from. I believe it's coming from Michael. We have a whole set of programs on demand to keep you engaged with JNF. I encourage you to do that. And once again, I thank you very much for your support and for what I know will be your continued support. And I wish everybody a safe and healthy continuation of this isolation. And I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in person once this is over. So thank you very much.